Realism. The realist movement in literature first developed in France in the mid 19th century, soon spreading to England, Russia, and the United States. Realist literature is best represented by the novel, including many works widely regarded to be among the greatest novels ever written. Realist writers employed an objective, unbiased perspective that focused on the factual elements of the story. They became masters at psychological characterization, detailed descriptions of everyday life, and natural dialogue. Realist writers often focused on themes of socio-economic conflict by contrasting the living conditions of the poor with those of the upper classes. Naturalism and regionalism are the offshoots of realism. Realism also exerted a profound influence on drama and theatrical productions. Representative works: Anna Karenina. Anna Karenina, by the Russian realist writer Leo Tolstoy, is considered one of the greatest novels of all time. The story concerns the intrigues of three Russian families: the Oblonskys, the Karenins, and the Levins. In the Oblonsky family, the husband Stiva is unfaithful to his wife Dolly. The Karenin family is disrupted when Anna Karenina leaves her husband and child because of her affair with a young military officer. The third element of the novel concerns the young Konstantin Levin and his courtship of Dolly's sister Kitty. The character of Konstantin embodies one of Tolstoy's major philosophical values, that the best life is lived through the daily events of honest work, a stable family, and a domestic situation, and that intellectualizing about life is useless. Ball of Fat. Ball of Fat is considered the masterpiece of Maupassant. It is a compendium of stories by different authors writing on the subject of the Franco-German War of 1870. It is the story of a prostitute traveling by coach to flee German occupation with some other passengers. Those passengers persuade her to satisfy the lust of a German military officer to continue their journey. But soon afterwards, they ostracize her for that disgraceful act. Ball of Fat is a notable example of Maupassant's mastery at economical composition in the short story form. Crime and Punishment. Crime and Punishment by the Russian realist writer Fyodor Dostoevsky is considered one of the greatest novels of all time. In Crime and Punishment, a young intellectual, Raskolnikov, uses philosophical reasoning to justify his plan of murdering an old woman for her money. However, after the murder, he is filled with a sort of spiritual dread. Raskolnikov is convicted and sent to prison. He experiences a religious conversion while in prison. Dostoevsky is celebrated for his detailed psychological study of the character Raskolnikov, tracing the complex factors which motivate his crime. Daisy Miller. Daisy Miller is Henry James's early novella. It tells the story of a young, beautiful American woman who is in Europe. She is introduced to a man named Winterbourne. Her flirtatious nature confuses Winterbourne and displeases other Europeans in their social circle. Winterbourne breaks with her. Daisy becomes ill and dies within days. Daisy Miller was an immediate success and continues to be popular among James's works. David Copperfield. David Copperfield is one of the most popular novels of Charles Dickens, and it was the author's personal favorite. It is most noted for the early chapters describing Dickens' childhood experiences. Among these is a description of Dickens' experience of being taken out of school as a child to work in a factory in London. In David Copperfield, Dickens addresses the social injustices of urban poverty and industrial labor. Germinal. The novel Germinal is considered the masterpiece of Émile Zola, a French realist writer and the originator of the school of naturalism in literature. Germinal is set in a mining town and portrays the socio-economic tensions between the working class miners and the upper class mine owners. Zola uses the metaphor of a monster to describe the coal mine which devours the workers who enter it. In Germinal, Zola accurately represents the conditions of the two separate social spheres, as well as tackling important political debates regarding inequalities in socio-economic class. A Hazard of New Fortunes. A Hazard of New Fortunes by the foremost American realist William Dean Howells is regarded as one of the author's most important novels. It is wide in scope and contains many characters like Tolstoy's War and Peace. It concerns a group of people trying to start a magazine. Howell expressed strong socialist views in A Hazard of New Fortunes. The Human Comedy. The Human Comedy is a compendium of some 90 novels and novellas by Balzac. In his fiction, Balzac portrays all levels of French society with impressive accuracy. He is noted for the vast number of different characters created in his fiction, numbering some 3,000 throughout the Human Comedy. Balzac introduced the literary device of including many of the same characters in different novels. Balzac was a master of characterization. He portrayed the psychological and sociological minutiae that make up each individual's personality and determine his action. Madame Bovary. Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert is considered a masterpiece of French realist fiction. Madame Bovary is the story of a middle-class woman whose rampant consumerism, debt, and extramarital affairs lead to tragedy and her suicide. The novel is noted for Flaubert's narrative objectivity and the psychological detail by which he accounts for the course of events initiated by the character. Middlemarch. Middlemarch by George Eliot is a masterpiece of English realism. Middlemarch is set in a small fictional town in rural England and is noted for the detail with which Eliot depicted characters from all walks of life. The central figure of the story is Dorothea Brooke, a young woman who marries an older clergyman because she hopes to do something meaningful with her life. Eliot explores the idea that personal accomplishment may be eclipsed by some social convention or some flaw of character. Middlemarch is considered a high point in the development of the novel, elevating the form with its intellectual and metaphoric complexity. Themes. Class conflict. One of the major themes addressed by the realist writers is socio-economic class conflict. Many realist writers, in their efforts to depict characters from all levels of society, highlighted differences between the rich and the poor. In David Copperfield, the protagonist experiences the suffering of impoverished children forced to work in urban factories. In Germinal, Zola focuses on the conflict between working class miners and wealthy mine owners. In A Hazard of New Fortunes, Howell portrays various characters who come into conflict over their efforts to start a magazine. In War and Peace, Tolstoy portrays conflicts between the Russian landowners and the serfs who work their land. Many realist authors thus addressed social, economic, and political concerns through their depictions of socio-economic class conflict. The City. Many realist novelists